Hi, everybody. I'm back. Fallen off the wagon, but back on the wagon now. Thanks very much to my dear friend and inspiration, Austin Wintory. Hi, Austin.
Maybe this isn't you getting back on the wagon. Maybe this is season two.
Okay, yeah,
You did
that's right.
like a very limited season one as like a pilot, and now we're in production.
You see,
See?
guys, that's how a genius thinks. Okay, so welcome to
No, you're
season
back.
two.
That's all. I just don't want people to think that there's no wagon falling.
No. So yes, that was a break, and now we are on the first episode, which is technically episode 8 of Five Questions with Tina, episode 1 of season 2, featuring the amazing, fantastic composer, musician, human being Austin Wintory. He is a 7-time BAFTA nominee and a 2-time winner. Yay! And Austin was
Most
also
of all part thanks to you.
oh,
If it weren't for those
oh
solos, I don't think anybody would. I mean that in all earnestness.
no, he's just being nice, you guys.
I
I
really
have
know. I'm
nothing to
actually
do with
an
it.
asshole, but I have to be honest. So they kind of end up invalidating each other. But it is true. All the
Oh,
scores that people seem to like the most tend to have a common ingredient, a certain potato cellist who
pizza eating potato challenge.
appears from one score to the next. So
Oh, thanks,
true.
Austin. And he was also the first ever in the history of the universe Grammy nominated for the best soundtrack, which was always films previous to this, and this is for the video game Journey, which I was very, 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 very lucky to have been able to record on. So thank you for that, Austin.
Well, it's my case in point demonstration. And what I love is, as I remember, a thing that frames how long ago that was now
Oh
is
boy.
finishing Journey.
Uh,
I remember I rewrote the very last cue, and I wrote this really high solo for you, and you were on tour with Cirque, and I remember you were in town for like an hour, and somehow I convinced you slash you were just gracious enough to come do this one last pickup in the tiny window that you had, because you weren't going to be around again until after I had to have the score fully delivered. And I remember thinking, this is going to be so heartbreaking if I have to go get another cellist for like, yes, it's just one short little bit. You'd already recorded like, all the piles of other solos, but it was the very last moment of the game. It's like the most vulnerable. It's unaccompanied, super exposed and high. And I will always remember, because that you doing that Cirque tour feels like 1,000 years ago.
It was 1,000 years ago. I left for it in winter. Oh no, yes, of 2010, and it's 2021. It's almost 2022, so over a decade ago. We have known each
Crazy.
other a long time, Austin,
I
and
know.
we don't
Well,
hate each other yet, so that's a good
well,
thing.
let's see how this goes, and maybe we can. This will turn into outright warfare.
Yeah, that would be fun. I would love to have like a feud. That would be great. And then another fact about Austin is that one of his tenets in life is always trying to avoid doing the same thing twice, which I really love. I love
Mm.
that. That's creativity. So, are you ready for these 5 questions? Very serious,
Oh
serious
yeah.
questions. Okay, number one: what's your favorite type of pizza and why?
I guess that's obligatory from you. Um, I You know, over time, I've migrated towards simpler is better. I like a good margarita on a thin crust. There's a place in LA called Lucifer's that
I
is,
like.
they do spicy,
Mhm.
like they put spiciness in the marinara and stuff. So a spicy margarita is pretty damn hard to beat.
Wow, I've never. I love the name Lucifer's. I've never been there. Where is it in LA?
There's a few of them. There's one in Studio City. That's the closest one to me. There's also the original one is in Los Feliz, where I used to live when I very first moved here.
Mhm.
And it's like, you go in and it's all goth with like melted candles, and the sign is like, it's damn good or whatever. And they're like, faux goth. They're the faux goth where it's all Satan worship, but it's, largely like teenagers, working a summer job behind the counter.
I
So,
love
but
it.
it is genuinely excellent. And the spiciness, once you have spicy pizza, you're like, I never thought of that before, and there's no going back.
Yeah. Oh, okay, that sounds amazing. I'll have to try it because I'm moving back to LA next
I
year.
know.
Um,
I
okay,
will show up with like 500 of these. You
500.
will be expected to eat only that for weeks and weeks.
Oh boy, thank you. All right, Austin. Question number two: which superpower would you not want?
Would I not want?
Hmm.
That's an interesting question. I think like this is sounds kind of like a cheat because it's not really a superhero power so much as a god power, but I would never want to be immortal. Like I guess in the Superman's actually obviously not immortal, but the idea of um truly being uh trapped forever sounds terrifying actually to me.
Hmm.
There's something about having to maximize the time we have because I'm down with all the others. Flying would probably be the number one pick. I've always been a fan of the kind of Wolverine style ultra healing power where you can like snap your neck and then it kind of just fixes all that. Down for that, um but I don't know if immortality um
That's
would be
good.
appealing.
It makes sense.
It
It
feels like a
makes
cheat
you
though, because no superhero is like truly technically
completely
immortal.
immortal. Yeah, I probably wouldn't want to know what everybody was thinking, like mind reading. I actually wouldn't want to know because I feel like so much of like relationship building and dynamics and
It's a great answer.
mystery. Yeah, it's all about like. But as far as immortality, I agree with you too because I think that's what gives value to life is when you know it can end at any second. That makes you really want to, like you said, maximize your time and potential. And I think that's what gives more value to it.
The mind reading is actually probably an even better answer though, because I thought of this episode of Next Generation where Picard and Crusher end up on a planet that for whatever reason gives them the ability to hear each other's thoughts. And they've
Right.
always had this very deep friendship and it's full of all these niceties that they do for each other that they don't actually like. So as soon as they can read each other's thoughts, they realize
Oh,
like, you know, you hate the tea I make for you or whatever. I can't remember the specifics, but they realize they've never been really fully honest with each other, but it's because they care about each other. And it's a great idea of how, of course, they end up bonding and becoming closer because of the experience. Because it's Star Trek, it tends to have a very squeaky clean
yeah.
final takeaway. But yeah, it was one of those where it was a good anti sales pitch on mind reading. It made you realize how even someone you care about, they're going to look at you and be like, "You thought what about me on November of 1999?" Like it's no good. I guess it's kind of like looking through old tweets,
Yeah.
times a million. So
Oh, it's
very,
terrible.
very
I look
unfiltered.
back on my own things that I posted and I'm like, "Tina, what is wrong with you?"
Same, yeah. The Facebook memories, the Facebook posts from like 13 years ago.
Yeah.
One of my
That's
big pet peeves is when composers complain about being too busy because it's
uh-huh.
such a hard job to be busy at all that to then suddenly complain that you've got too much going on feels so like callously unaware of how many people are trying to find work, and it just seems like you've kind of lost touch with how difficult it is to even be in that position, the kind of inherent privilege
Mhm.
of it. And so I see Facebook posted mine from like 12 or 13 years ago. They're like, "Oh my god, I'm so busy," and I'm like, I thought I always felt this way. Apparently not. I was that
Okay.
guy at one
We
point.
all we all change and grow. No, I know. I saw some Facebook memories this morning and I actually went in and edited the post to like take out some of the embarrassing parts just in case somebody goes back 12 years and they're like, "What the
That's so funny. That I haven't done. That
Yeah,
that
I will
that's a
go back
whole
and
other
change it. I'm like, "I can't, this is unacceptable." So, um,
redacting your memories.
question number 3, what are your passions outside of music?
As you know, again, another partner in crime moment. My biggest passion, I would say, is science, and the it's like evangelizing for the beauty and excitement of science. Hence, the thing that we did almost exactly 3 years ago. 3 years ago, and like 2 days, I think. A light in the void. But I've always loved one of my first jobs I ever got when I came to LA was writing podcast intros for NASA scientists who were experimenting with podcasts were brand new. This was 15 years ago. Podcast as a format was still very novel, and these NASA scientists at JPL here, in Pasadena, realized, we can kind of do a semi real time update to the public of all the cool stuff we're discovering. There was with the Spitzer Space Telescope, which was it's sort of retired now, but it's a like the Hubble telescope uses visual light like a big camera. The Spitzer Space Telescope is an infrared camera that can see only in the infrared wavelengths, and so the result is that it can see through big dust clouds and it can see really far and really low energy light. And so they made like a million amazing discoveries about the cosmos with this thing, and they were doing a weekly podcast about it. So they were looking for music to serve as kind of like dramatic underscore and bumpers for the intros. And so I wrote as one of my very first jobs that paid me like, like $100 or something. And I was
I love it.
stoked because these were real scientists. I got to hang
Yeah.
out with, they weren't like the PR department. These were the actual people studying the data and figuring out how to kind of make it understandable to the public. And I just thought this is the coolest. Like this is the dream job. But the pay is irrelevant because it's my single biggest passion. Connecting to my actual job. So
That's
yeah, for me,
amazing.
anything connected to science is kind of second tier, second like you know
Tier
yeah, second tier
excitement.
sounds so kind of diminutive. What I mean is like that's the if I could only do that for the rest of my life for some reason, like if music was somehow warped out of my brain, I could be happy in a life filled with science and science communication.
I love it. That's so awesome. I'm gonna pretend I didn't know that already, but wow, Austin, that's amazing. Okay, number 4.
Well, you got your own amnesia ray, so
Yes.
it works.
Number 4. What is the most embarrassing thing that has ever happened to you?
Oh man.
We
I
we
don't
all
know
wanna
if
know. The
I don't
world
know if
wants
this
to
is
know.
the most, but it's got to be up there. Um, I remember I went to a movie premiere once for a film I had scored. Like it was at a film festival,
Mhm.
and the writer and producer of that had already written and produced and shot his next film and asked me to score it. So I hadn't seen it yet. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew the next job was coming, and but it had different producers. So these new people who I hadn't met, but I was gonna be working with, came to this premiere at the film festival, and we got to meet. And one of the things about this first film was that the two writer, producers were also they were the co-leads. They were the lead actors and writers and producers. Um, and they had been actors their whole life. The writing and producing thing was like the kind of new thing for them. So I'm meeting this new producer now for the next project that's coming, and um kind of jokingly I'm like so are you gonna act in this one also, because that was like the thing. They were all like doing all the hats. They were acting, writing, producing, everything. And so this producer, I just said to him, you're gonna act. And he goes, nah, I spent a lot of my life in front of the camera, and I'm more than happy to stay behind it now. And I was like, that's cool. And his wife goes, he's being modest. He was a really successful child actor. And in this, I don't know if I was like tipsy or so, but in this really weirdly rude and confrontational way. I don't know what I guess I thought I was being funny. I
Yeah.
just like get in his face and go, am I supposed to know you from something? Uh,
Austin!
it was
That
so like,
is so
I don't
rude.
know what the hell came
Oh my
over me.
god.
And I remember the person I was with at the time was having like this total fangirl moment because she absolutely recognized him because he was the older brother on Home Improvement. This is an actor named Zach Ty Bryan. I
Yeah,
never I never watched that show, so I didn't really know him from that. And so she was sitting there mortified that
um,
and she kept going like Home Improvement. and and then I, kind of connected the dots, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. And the more I thought about it, I was like, that was so weirdly rude and like out of nowhere. I remember I like couldn't sleep, and I sent him an email at like 2 in the morning that said, dude, I don't mean to start off our friendship and our working relationship on the wrong foot. I don't know why I was so weird to you.
Yeah.
And he was like, honestly, it's so rare to meet someone that isn't like slobbering because they know the show and they want to ask questions about, what's Tim Allen like and blah blah. He was like, honestly, it was weirdly refreshing and nice, and we're cool, and we're still
Yeah.
friends to this day. But it was one of those. There was like a whole
Oh,
crowd of people around us, and I just had this. I don't know what it was, but it's in hindsight, it's like a different person took over my body for a second because I just it's such an odd thing to say, and the way I said it was so confrontational for some reason. So yeah, I don't know if that's the worst. It's surely not the worst thing I've ever done. Um,
yeah. But that's good
and
that you, I mean, it's all about communication, right? And you apologize and you guys are all good.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah. No, it's all. He probably doesn't even remember that now. But yeah, it definitely was. It was. I just want to believe I thought I was being funny, and it was just in that moment, in the heat of the moment, my calculation about what defines funny was in a different universe entirely from this one.
Oh no. Oh, I love it. Okay, number 5. All right, it's not really, it's, I mean, it is a question. And I wrote strange but true. Now you can give us, this could be something about yourself, something very self-revealing, or it can just be a random fact that you think is totally crazy but it's actually true. If you're not comfortable revealing even more about yourself.
Strange but true.
Yeah.
Hmm. Let me think. Strange but true. Um, okay, here's one. This is a
Okay.
really morbid place to end this.
Oh,
Uh,
don't worry. There's gonna be one more thing after this, so
okay,
don't
okay,
be
perfect.
disappointed. Okay, okay.
Uh, this is strange and dark, but it's true. I would not be alive if not for the Holocaust, because
Oh.
my family, on my father's side, his father and that whole cadre of that generation, my grandfather's generation, they were German Jews living in Berlin who fled in 1938.
Mhm,
And my grandfather was a teenager at the time, and they had to go through all the madness that everybody was going through. The family was split up, not everybody made it out. At one point, they ended up in the camps before they kind of in the mid to late 30s, before
mhm,
the camps were like execution, death camps. They were more like the Japanese internment camps in the U.S. They were kind of like open air prisons. They weren't really, and even like labor camps. They weren't just these mass execution sites.
mhm.
So members of my family had been in prison there, managed to get their way out, make their way to the America, and because my grandfather met an American woman who was my grandmother, uh, and that's where my dad came from. And so, and they had an amazing life in Germany. And so, if they had not been tipped off that they were literally going to be, they got like a note, one night that said you should leave tonight because tomorrow they're coming, and no one will ever hear from you again. So they left that night.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't, if none of that horrible shit had been going on, like if you could go back in time and
Mhm,
kill Hitler, I
uh-huh.
would cease to exist. And I've always thought that was strange. That I owe my life in a very real way. I'm sure there's millions and millions of people that's true for also, because all these displaced refugees, ended up in different parts of the world, especially
Right, right.
here,
Yeah.
and met people and married people they would never have met otherwise. And so, but anyway,
The
there's my
butterfly
strange.
effect.
For the
I love
record, the other thing that occurred to me is that for some reason on my feet, two of my toes are slightly webbed, and I debated about saying that instead. So I
Oh
gave
my gosh,
you
Austin Wintory has web toes, everybody.
they're like if these are the toes, they're kind of like webbed to the knuckle here. So if
Uh-huh.
I bend them, they kind of do that, as opposed to like being webbed.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
spent
yeah.
a lot of time scuba diving. It is in no way helpful.
Okay. It's okay. A lot of people
Not a
have web toes.
fin. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. That's great. Well, thank you for that very revealing
you can
uh,
have two.
uh
I think it reveals a lot about me and where my head goes more than
yeah,
anything.
exactly. And because I said that's not, so those are the 5 questions, and I always end this podcast with, is there any like advice I guess on a slightly more serious or professional note,
Mhm.
is there any advice that you would give to young aspiring composers, artists, creatives, musicians, whatever?
I think I've always wondered kind of what the best soundbite advice is, where you don't like, because there's two ways to give advice. Obviously, the other way is you have this like long conversation with someone, you figure out what they're all about, you try to kind of cater your thoughts to their
Right.
path in life. But in this context, where I try to think what could be most useful, um, I the thing I always come back to is I remember when I first came to LA and I had my first meetings with like directors that were looking for a composer or producers or whatever. I remember, when you have no credits and you have absolutely no leg to stand on professionally, and it just feels like it's going to be random luck if they hire you. And so you're looking for any advantage you can and like any way to persuade them. It's very tempting to try to just be who you think they want you to be. And I remember conversations where they would say things like, hey, did you see? I'm trying to think of what a good representative movie at the time would have been, but like, I guess the Star Wars prequels had just kind of finished. Like episode 3, I guess, came out like
Mhm.
basically as I moved to LA in 2005. So like, hey, did you see Revenge of the Sith? And it's like, yeah, what'd you think of it? And they're like, oh, I hated it. And you're like, yeah, I hated it, right? It's like I felt this temptation to kind of go with whatever they were looking for, because I just thought, in my mind, they were looking for any reason to say no, because they had this pile of demos and pile of composers, and it's any little thing that they can go, I didn't like the shirt that guy was wearing, and she had a funny accent, and like, because they just need some way to narrow down the list, and
Mhm.
it was a false belief that that's how they operate, instead of the one person in the 5,000 that stands out like this bright neon sign, cruising down the Las Vegas Strip, where you see like the beam of light coming off the Luxor, and you go, all these other things suddenly disappear because I see this one thing. And it took a long time to internalize that. And it sounds so cliche to say, be yourself. But the way I've come to frame it is, don't be afraid to be divisive and to like throw down your opinion. And the real big turning point for me, ironically, it was on that movie that I was at the premiere of in the earlier story, my
Oh,
shining
okay.
moment. The I got that job because it had been a few years, I had done a few projects, I had built up just enough confidence to try something really crazy. So when they asked me to demo for the movie, I wrote this pretty wacky thing. I hired Ayana Haviv to do these crazy vocals, and I did all this other stuff. And then the director called me and he goes, "This music is completely wrong."
Mhm.
Like, he goes, "I don't think anything about this works. But the kind of composer that would be crazy enough to try this is exactly who we need. So you're hired."
I love
And
it. I
it was
love it.
such a light bulb moment of realizing I need to just broadcast who I am authentically, and let
Yes,
them
yes,
decide if they like that or not. And it's okay
yes.
if they don't. It's okay if they're really looking for some other personality or a different way
Mhm.
of approaching music or whatever. It really is okay.
Mhm.
And I empathize that that's a really hard thing to absorb
It
when you're first getting started, because you have no confidence. There's no career that's springing from. So I know it takes a lot of willpower, but that's always just be divisive, like not intentionally, you know,
Mhm.
off-putting or something, but don't be afraid to throw down, hot takes or whatever that if they really define you. So anyway, there's my attempt at a
I
short version.
I love it, pure authenticity, and I really do admire and love that about you, Austin. You've always been, as long as I've known you, which is since I think since you moved to LA,
Since
right?
fetal stages,
Yeah, since
since
since we
the
were both
womb, I
children.
believe.
No, you've always been very much you, like your music, your art, you hear it, you're like, "That's Austin," and I think having that signature, I think, in my very humble humble opinion, honestly, I'm not being facetious, my humble opinion, that's rare. I don't think that's super common because a
Well, and
lot of
right back at
people,
you.
yeah,
You've
are.
always been you've always operated the same way as a performer and as a writer
Mhm,
and as a
mhm.
producer and as a, I mean, I remember when we were doing Journey is when you self made your Queen Bee video, and it was like, what other cellist would think to do that and then actually not just daydream about it but go through with it. So if anything, I'm just stealing your
No,
philosophy.
no, with the help of an amazing team, but yes, thank you. Yeah, I think it's so important, but people read. I mean, this is not about me. This is about you. But it's so important
Never.
to not be scared, to show your true self, because, like Austin said, we're not immortal. Life is going to be over, So you gotta grab life by the balls while you can, and ride it. Oh, that's a very sexual term.
Love it. Perfect. Nailed it.
Okay, perfect. Um, Thank you guys so much for watching this podcast, season 2. Thanks, Austin. This is episode 8 of 5 Questions with Tina. This was the amazing Austin Wintory. I'll put all of his links below. You probably already follow him, but still, I'll put it below anyway. You can check out his stuff or contact him there. And I will see you guys very soon. Bye. Thanks, Austin.
Bye.
Bye.